I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Today we're ranking the Elden Ring bosses of Caelid. If you missed the last two episodes in this series, featuring Limgrave and Liurnia, click the card in the top right corner or check the description for links. For my own sanity, I decided to split up Caelid and Dragon Barrow into two videos, so if a boss doesn't appear on today's list that you think should be there, check the wiki and make sure it's not a Dragon Barrow boss first. The rules are simple, I'm ranking every boss that has an official boss health bar, and that's it. So let's jump right in. All 14 Caelid Elden Ring bosses, ranked. Let me know your favourite down below. At number 14, we have the Cemetery Shade found in the Caelid Catacombs. If I had a nickel for the amount of times a Cemetery Shade landed on one of my lists in a position that's a multiple of 14, I'd have 3 nickels, which is the highest amount I could actually obtain with this scenario in Elden Ring. Didn't think that was where this meme was going. There's nothing unique about the Caelid Cemetery Shade to distinguish it from the Shade of the Weeping Peninsula. They're both fought in the same end of Catacombs area, they both fight alone with no friends to help them, with the only difference being that this Shade has a tad bit more health, 1467 HP. I love the way the Shade can cause bleed build-up, and its mobility does lend this variant to a more engaging fight as it survives for longer. It drops the Kindred of Rot Spirit Ashes, which you'd think would be a great summon. Kindred of Rot enemies are insanely good at killing the player with their projectiles, but the reality is that the summon isn't as strong as their regular enemy variant, and other spirit summons just have more utility. Fun to fuck around with though. A Cemetery Shade is still a Cemetery Shade, and I have to say, I'm grateful this is the last of them I'll be ranking in this series. At number 13, we have the Mad Pumpkinheads found beneath the Caelid ruins. While the original Mad Pumpkinhead fight in Limgrave was a novel concept, by the time you fight this pair, you've likely faced off against other Pumpkinheads across the lands between as regular enemies, so their novelty has long since worn off. They're two big, bulky enemies with flaming weapons who are easy to underestimate. Just look at me, taking a death to these guys almost immediately. You have to play very conservative with this group, looking for the right openings and trying not to let either of them out of your sight. With one wielding a hammer, the other a flail, you have to choose who to focus down first. The flail wielder can cause bleed buildup, which could be brutal if you take too many careless hits, while the hammer wielder hits harder to compensate for a lack of status effects. I personally took out the flail wielder first, but I kept swapping my main target based on who I knew I could hit at the time. Their helmets were an absolute pain in the ass to deal with because it forced me to take a lot of time to ensure I'd 100% land a hit and not have it bounce off. But that strategy at least makes the fight feel unique. You can also choose to ride Torrent in this fight. While that's a strategy that would drive me up the wall, some of you might find use out of it. They guard the Visage shield, which is one of my favourite in the game. The shield can shoot flames with its tongues of fire skill, similar to the flamethrower of the Erdtree Burial Watchdogs. But you lose stability while it's active, so you have to know when to block and when to go on the offensive. A great reward for a pretty bland boss fight. At number 12, we have the Knights Cavalry, found patrolling Caelid Highway near the Cathedral of Dragon Communion. Wielding the flail, this unit has the same move pool as the Weeping Peninsula Cavalry unit, but has a much higher HP pool to provide a larger threat. I'll always champion that the Knights Cavalries are fun to fight, on torrent, off torrent, trying to snipe them without killing their horses, or slaughtering their steeds to get those critical hits. I just think they're neat. He's fought very close to decaying Exeek's arena, so my recommendation would always be to kill the dragon first, allowing you the security of knowing you won't accidentally lead the cavalry unit towards Exeek's, who would then kill you both. He drops the Poison Moth Flight Ash of War, which is effectively a free poison slash that the players can use. If it's on an enemy that's already poisoned, the damage increases drastically. I could see the use for this in 1v1s, and it's clearly an Ash of War the developers like, as it's received buffs to its poison damage, duration, and animation speed. Not a bad night's out with the Knights Cavalry. At number 11, we have the Frenzied Duelist found at the bottom of the jail cave. We don't see the duelists as proper bosses all that often, but when they do show up, I always find them to be so cool in design. This guy wields a giant axe, which is more intimidating than the hammers I'm used to from these guys, but with it comes a much slower moveset that's easier to predict, dodge through, and guard against. I never really found myself panicked or in danger against the frenzied duelist. He rarely used his chains, which was part of why I loved the original one in Limgrave. His attacks have a lot of forwards momentum, which is easily avoidable and exploitable once you've gotten used to his moveset. Ultimately, I found him to be a super easy fight. Definitely fits the theme of his dungeon too, a chained up gladiator at the bottom of a cavernous jail. He drops the putrid corpse ashes upon defeat, which, I mean, they're basically there to look pretty and draw aggro. They're not damaging dealing spirits of any kind, but have tanky HP pools that offer a great distraction benefit. Outside the cave, we can also find the regalia of Aaviir's straight sword, which is often considered a much speedier version of Elmer of the Briar's signature weapon, due to both of them sharing the same weapon skill. Want to use the Force? It only costs 12 Strength, 18 Dex, and 15 Arcane. I've seen some pretty nasty looking builds designed around this sword, but ironically, you can reach its location without even going through the dungeon if you do some clever platforming. So do I attribute this weapon as a reward for the frenzied duelist boss fight? That's for you to decide. At number 10, we have Decaying ItsZerozz, a rot-infested dragon who is literally too angry to die. It's no secret that him being placed so close to the Dragon Communion Cathedral was a purposeful choice. He wanted the concept of Dragon Communion to sashay away, and now he's just pissed at anyone trying to drive past him. His fight is relatively similar to the rest of the field dragons of Elden Ring, though like the glintstone dragons harnessing magic, he harnesses the power of scarlet rot. Avoiding his breath attacks is a requirement for dealing with this boss, and having Torrent is a must for avoiding some of his tougher attacks. The move where dragons breathe fire while hopping backwards is suddenly far more deadly with scarlet rot as the focus. But ItsZerozz's deadliest ability is his rotting miasma. He'll turn to the ground and fire a giant cloud of scarlet rot that covers a vast majority of his arena. Basically, if you see him charging this move, flee, and even then, there's no guarantee you'll make it out unscathed. I had boluses to heal Scarlet Rot at the ready, and I regret nothing. The only plus is that he doesn't use this attack often. But even then, it's the same as trying to read Malenia's waterfowl dance timer, you always have to be ready to run regardless. Defeating him allows you to purchase ItsZerozz's Decay from the Dragon Communion Cathedral in Caelid, which allows you to spew out rot breath at your opponents. There are better alternatives to this incantation though, especially after it was nerfed in the 1.07 patch. ItsZerozz is a frustrating fight because the Scarlet Rot attacks sap your health and stagger you if you get caught in them, giving virtually no counterplay. But he's unique enough that I'm cool putting him above the entries before him. At number 9, we have the Magma Worm found in the Jail Tunnel. Now for all my praise regarding Magma Worm Makar in the Liurnia video, we now have to roll back and look at his neutered cousin, the Jail Tunnel Magma Worm. Why do I say this? Well, unlike the rest of his species, this specific worm doesn't have access to the Phase 2 where he stands on his hind legs. Instead, we get an entire fight of the worm charging towards the player, vomiting lava pools, and doing half-hearted curved sword forward swings. I specifically like the Magma Worms because of their ability to shift their moveset mid-fight, giving a more dynamic challenge for the player. And of the two phases, I vastly prefer their second phase to the first. So this specific Magma Worm taking the part of the boss I find inferior and making that the entire experience is a bit of a disappointment. Even then though, a Magma Worm is still more interesting to me than the 5th Knight's Cavalry or a duelist with an axe. Plus, he drops the Moonveil Katana. Now, I've never dabbled with the meta weapons when Elden Ring came out, but Moonveil was one of those weapons people wouldn't shut the fuck up about, so I can infer from that, it's a great weapon to find. Especially with its transient moonlight skill that can create fast and cheap projectiles for the player at the cost of very low FP. Still, the boss itself doesn't quite do it for my tastes, so despite the OP weapon, it stays at number 9 on today's list. At number 8, we have the Nox Swordstress and Nox Priest found in Sellia, Town of Sorcery. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually think Caelid has some really good gank fights hidden away in its depths. The Nox duo have the potential to be really entertaining, what with their unique stretchy weapons that you likely won't be used to just yet, as there's a high chance you haven't visited Noxstella or Nokron. I love the Swordstress's moveset. The sword that becomes a whip is just so fucking cool. My problem with this fight is that when I arrived, my weapon was overleveled and I mowed through their health like paper. I remember on my first playthrough being relatively challenged by the pair, but on this recorded run, they were nothing. Well, I say that, but you can see from the footage I had multiple instances of getting close to dying, but once I got near enough to them where they couldn't dodge away, I got the free kill. They remind me for some reason of Throne Watcher and Defender from Dark Souls 2, and I still don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. They drop the Nox Flowing Sword upon defeat, which is the weapon I want to fuck around with a bit more in my off time. I just love weapons that have a slight edge to them. A liquid sword that could contort its shape? Sign me the fuck up. Next time I'll try fighting these guys much earlier in my playthrough, see how tough they are then. Tougher than me trying to reach 35,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Who knows, if you enjoy the rest of the video, consider contorting your hands like they contort their swords, and parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all my future videos. Or go the extra mile and consider becoming a channel member. It's $4.99 a month and gets you early access to future videos, plus a shout out in the description and at the end of every video as well. The Nox Swordstress could never. At number 7, we have the Misbegotten Warrior and Crucible Knight fought at Castle Redmane. Now, I didn't end up completing this fight on my first playthrough, as I came to Redmane for the first time during the Radahn Festival, and after completing that quest, I left and never returned. On the second playthrough though, I wanted to experience this brutal duo fight that people had been complaining about for the past year. And what I got was an incredibly simple fight where I was able to destroy the Misbegotten Warrior long before the Crucible Knight even reached me. From that point on, it becomes a Crucible Knight fight with the Sword and Shield variant that I'm already used to thanks to the Stormhill Evergaol. Same moveset, even down to the Crucible Tail incantation. Side note, absolutely love that animation. This boss drops the Ruins Greatsword, which is literally just a piece of crumbling Farum Azula that they stuck a handle on and said, this is now a weapon. Honestly, iconic behavior. Adapt, improvise, overcome. And its weapon skill, Wave of Destruction, I mean, welcome back Dark Souls Dragon Greatsword, I missed you so much. The boss fight isn't anything to write home about, but it wasn't offensive or anything like everyone made it out to be. Middle-of-the-road gank getting a middle-of-the-road finish. At number 6, we have the Putrid Avatar found at the Minor Erdtree near the entrance of Caelid. I've gone on record in a past video stating that this is my favourite Putrid Avatar, for the sheer fact that it provides a real challenge depending on when you go to fight it. You can enter Caelid very early into the game, and this boss being just a hop, skip and a jump away from the nearest Grace means it's easy to keep reattempting the fight. I underestimated how much the viewers at home love a Putrid Avatar. I have to remind myself that my hatred of Scarlet Rot is not everyone's hatred of Scarlet Rot, and that's okay. This boss forces you to watch your spatial awareness, but as I discovered through various comments, there are ways around its more devastating moves that make the fight more fun. For example, the Rot Butt Slam that leaves a series of rot puddles ahead of the boss, you can simply sidestep around and continue attacking from behind the boss, no risk of Scarlet Rot infection. Something that easy to perform means that you can keep up your level of aggression on the enemy, which makes for a more fun fight than running backwards anytime Scarlet Rot is launched from that booty bounce. None of those words were in the Bible. This boss has two fairly useful drops in the form of the Flame Shrouding Cracked tier, which temporarily boosts the power of fire attacks for 3 minutes, as well as the Green Burst Crystal tier, which boosts stamina recovery for 15 for 3 minutes. Putrid Avatar guarding some pretty good items here. Maybe on a replay with this new knowledge about how to take advantage of the Putrid Avatars, I'll enjoy them more. Maybe. At number 5, we have the Erdtree Burial Watchdog duo found in the Minor Erdtree Catacombs. A rare case where I actually feel that adding a second version of the boss actually works. The Watchdog duo have movesets that are slow enough to fight around, but with enough complexity that you can't be too careful. The sword variant is the more aggressive of the two, while the staff variant will often hold itself back, casting its ranged magic attack from a distance. They'll tag team when it comes to its flamethrower move, but you generally have enough space in the arena to avoid the attack. Finding openings to strike each watchdog, guard countering simple sword swings before dodging away from a nearby staff slam, rolling from the bosses as they raise themselves up into the air. Maybe I'm just delusional, but I handled these two expertly, and I didn't find myself flustered or backed into a corner like with other gank fights. I don't think it was intended for them to work so well together, but the developers lucked out, and I got a fight I don't hate. They dropped the Mad Pumpkinhead Ashes, which have a built-in system that makes their main form of damage, bleed buildup, completely fucking useless. As if any creature in their vicinity takes blood loss, they go on a big tantrum and take themselves out of the fight for a few moments. It's ridiculous and impossible to work with. I don't need to be babysitting, go back to your room. Love the boss, but I feel the watchdogs are destined to have some of the most bland spirit ashes in the game as rewards. At number 4, we have the Deathrite bird found in southern Caelid. Now, if there's a fight that really ups the ante, it'd be this guy. The first Deathrite bird in Liurnia was fine, because throughout that encounter it used most of its spells, but never dabbled in the true danger of its kit. The Deathrite birds from Caelid onwards, however, knew exactly how to corner an injured Billy S. My kryptonite comes in the form of the attacks that leave fire trails across the arena. Watch how this bird corners me against level geometry and sends a cone of fire my way. This was psychological torture. And God forbid you flee towards the road where the giants on the cliffs can see you. Projectiles being lobbed at you while you're trying to fight? No thanks. Or perhaps, yes please, the projectiles can damage the Deathrite bird, so if you want to play it that way, you can. Shout out to this painful death of mine where I thought, oh, I can get the last hit before I die from the flames, only to realize I was going to get stagger killed a second too late. I was glutton for punishment when it came to that AoE, I swear. It drops the Death's Poker upon defeat, the Deathrite bird's signature weapon, which allows you, the player, to control the ghost flames yourself, cause a massive explosion, or send a wave across the ground. The power is in your hands. Deathrite birds are so cool, and I like that it's possible to use the environment to your advantage with this Caelid variant, but the other 3 bosses here are just so much more iconic. At number 3, we have the Falling Star Beast found in the Celia Crystal Tunnel. Many of us have fond nightmares of this boss, as the Crystal Tunnel is where you're warped to following that trapped chest in Limgrave, and little did we know we'd have to face one of the toughest mid-game field bosses. The Falling Star Beast has a wide moveset with a series of charges you have to dodge through, swipes, stomps and bites, alongside a tough-to-avoid tail swipe. There's the Sonic Spinball move where it leaps into the air to do a jump roll at you, and my favourite attacks, the gravity magic. The first is Gravitas, which pulls the player in close if you're nearby when it activates, which is usually followed by rocky spikes surrounding the boss. The more fun attack is Gravity Bolt, which has the same premise of trying to impale you with rocky spikes from below, except that this time it does 3 of them in a timed rhythm that you have to learn to dodge. Plus, its animation is hilariously casual as it struts around lifting its head up. There's only 2 Falling Star Beasts and 1 fully grown beast in the game, and honestly, this is a case where I would be totally fine with more. They're so fun to fight and have an extremely fulfilling moveset to learn. This one also drops the Somber Stone Miner's Bellbearing 1, which allows you to purchase Somber Smithing Stone 1s and 2s from the Twin Maiden Husks. Valuable for upgrading some of your fancier gear, worth the kill. Give me more Falling Star Beasts. Quiero más. At number 2, we have Commander O'Neill, found in the middle of the Swamp of Aeonia. Now, I'm fully aware that O'Neill isn't the most beloved fight when it comes to the fanbase, but given he's one of only 2 bosses that shares this moveset, and he's a focal part of starting Millicent's questline, I don't know, I've always found him fun. He has the ability to summon exile soldier spirits to his aid when the fight begins, 5 regular at the start, and 3 larger as the fight continues. Once dead, they cannot be resummoned, so it's possible to slowly whittle down his army until he's alone. While his summons are on the field, he'll spend most of his time buffing them, either their attack speed or their defense. But if you're sufficiently leveled, you can kill his soldiers in 3 to 4 hits, not giving him time to power them up. His own attacks are a little frustrating to deal with, admittedly, as he'll most often attempt to drum up scarlet rot whirlwinds that afflicts the status effect. I had boluses going into the fight, but eventually had to accept that I was just gonna get scarlet rotted, and I had to play on the offensive to finish the fight before the status effect took me out. You can hop on Torrent to escape some of his faster moves, or you can just try to run, but it's a mechanic that you will have to learn as you go. Different methods work for different players, and O'Neill is 100% that type of boss. Fighting him earlier than was intended, I found his tanky HP and slow yet deliberate spear attacks fun to avoid. But let's be real here, Niall is the way better variant of this fight. He drops the Commander's Standard, his signature weapon upon defeat, in case you feel like waving around a flag. Its skill, Rallying Standard, is useful for multiplayer due to its ability to buff yourself and allies, but it's not really for me. You also get the unalloyed Gold Needle, which is required to continue Millicent's questline, making O'Neill a worthwhile target in the long run. I really enjoyed his fight, which you can tell because my bias against Scarlet Rod has all but been put aside for him, but the jump from the 2nd place boss in Caelid to the 1st place boss in Caelid is just unfair. At number 1, in a completely different league to everyone else, we have Star Scourge Radahn, one of the 7 shard bearers and quite possibly the biggest Chad in the entirety of Elden Ring. We've all heard the comical lore about him learning gravity magic so he could continue to ride Leonard his horse, but then we forget about how his gravity magic is so strong that it's keeping the stars in place, holding Ranni's fate in stasis. And that's not taking into account his gravity magic utilized in his boss fight, from rock slings to repelling and pulling inwards, to him becoming a fucking meteor for his phase transition. Radahn is a brutal legend who requires an entire army to take him down, a festival filled with the toughest warriors in the lands between, and patches. Yet while in my original playthrough I took all of my friends with me in the fight, here in my recorded run I did the fight solo, and it's rewarding to beat him. My biggest challenge was just trying to avoid his meteor slam, as with no other summons to distract him, he always aimed right at me. I know, I've had comments telling me how to handle that, thank you to everyone who gave me recommendations, they are noted, but I also find it funny getting one shot by a giant meteor transition. From his rain of arrows in Phase 1, to those damned rock slings in Phase 2 with the damage of a god, to his insane sword swings and combos that have me dodging beneath him and his horse for dear life, all set to one of the most epic tracks on the Elden Ring OST. I always love to listen to his Phase 2 music when I need motivation, because it's just so grandiose. This feels like the fight where Torrent is also a valuable ally, being used to outrun various attacks, make distance between you and Radahn, or just because the arena is so vast that you feel like hopping on your horse. It reminds me of Shadow of the Colossus, where for certain bosses like Dirge and Phalanx, your horse was a vital part of taking down each Colossi. Same thing here. Without Torrent, I don't want to imagine defeating Radahn. His Great Rune is also one of the best in the game. It allows anybody to become the tank of their dreams, and is stronger than Godric's Rune, which starts to give diminishing returns in the late game. There's no downside to Radahn, none whatsoever. He's literally a top 5 fight in Elden Ring for most players. He was my 2nd favourite fight in the game in my rankings last year, and whether I still feel that way or not, he's easily the best fight in Caelid, and the best fight of Elden Ring's early to mid-game. Shine on, Radahn. Shine on. And that's my list. I know there are a couple of bosses you might have been expecting on this video, but the wiki says they're in Dragon Barrow and I'm listening to the wiki, so tune in on Friday to see where all of those ones fell. I hope you guys enjoyed. Parry that subscribe button to stay up to date on all my future content if you're into it. My social medias are on screen now. Feel free to follow where you feel comfortable. I recommend my Twitter or my Discord. My Twitter is the best place though, let's be real. And a massive shout out to my YouTube channel members. Thank you so much for the support for another month. You guys are amazing, and it's you guys who help keep this channel alive. So, I'll see you guys next time. Adios.